Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Hi. 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 They were like children. You know how children come in and they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then they just leave? That's what that was. With dogs. Welcome to another monthly reading wrap up. This is going to be my discussion of all the books I read in February. So getting started, I read 4 books. One of them was an audiobook, 3 of them were physical copies, and yeah, I would say that I didn't read as much as I wanted to read, but I read very consistently and always was able to kind of make time for reading, which meant I wasn't making time for sleep. So yeah, 3 a.m. bedtimes, I need to work on that. The first book that I read it's one of those books that has like a really long subtitle, so I have to look at my phone. You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Sincero. I'm going to do a dedicated video about that book because I have so many thoughts that if I said them all in this video, it would take over and this video would be like 80% me talking about one book. But suffice it to say, I personally really enjoyed this book and got a lot out of it. However, there were some very big caveats that I feel like would be something that if I was to tell someone about the book, I would need to let them know. So, I mean, in terms of the things I liked about the book, I liked the conversations around like ending self-doubt and kind of negative self-talk. I didn't realize like there were some thought patterns I had about myself that this book actually helped me discover, which was really cool. So like in that way, I really liked the book and I personally got a lot out of it. But I mean, I don't know, I'm always a little bit like dubious about claims of like manifestation or, you know, spending money like you already have it. Like I think those are things that people in the wrong frame of mind can experience in a very negative way and can cause negative consequences for people. So yeah, it was kind of like a I'm not really sure about this one on those chapters. So keep your eyes out for that video. It should be coming shortly. Next up, I read Woman Running in the Mountains by Yuko Tsushima. And this is the story of a kind of slightly older than teenage, like young, I don't know what like young adult is, but like potentially like 19 to like in her like 20s, right? And she gets pregnant out of wedlock with a married man. And the book sort of talks about her experiences being a single mother living with her abusive family and how she kind of copes with that. And there's a lot of themes of escapism, kind of daydreaming in this book, especially in places like Japan. Even this book talks about it, how in Japan there's semi-strict rules regarding like how people are on family registries and how that can impact employment. That's one feature I really enjoyed about the book. The book includes footnotes that give the reader more context, which are obviously designed for international audiences reading this. So as an example, in this book, there's a line, this is not about the family registry, but it shows how these footnotes are added. Although the place was known to everyone at Misawa Gardens as the Mountain, strictly speaking, it was a hill lying just this side of the actual mountains. Then the footnote is, as a colloquial term, yama, mountain, can refer to a piece of privately owned wooded land that may not truly be mountainous. That it actually makes me laugh because yama in Russian is like a ditch. So it's funny that it's mountain in Japanese and ditch in Russian. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed this book, but not in this kind of grand sweeping way. I thought the book was interesting in the themes that it was exploring. Because of that, I'd be interested to read more from this author. Yuko Tsushima is the daughter of Osamu Dazai, and she was herself a single mother, so a lot of what she's writing likely comes from like personal reflection. So yeah, I'd be really curious what other kind of concepts and themes and social issues she finds interesting to talk about. After that, I read Korea, A New History of North and South by Victor Dicha and Ramon Pacheco Pardo. I was inspired to pick this up when I did. Well, first of all, I was inspired to buy it when I was in California because it looks really cool. And also because I knew I had several more Korean lit books on my shelves, and I figured at some point I would need to read a little bit more about the history of North and South Korea, especially as they relate to each other. And then I was inspired to pick it up now when I did, because last month I finished The End of August by Miri. So the way the book is structured is it divides chapters into specific time frames. So the first chapter is 19th century to 1945, which is a huge range. But basically it gives a little bit of the like history of the Korean Peninsula and then goes into Japanese occupation pretty quickly. And then the next chapter, right, it's 1945, end of World War II, up to the end of the Korean War. From there, it talks about like the Koreas as they're emerging as distinct entities, moving on. I mean, 1980 to 1990, they're just like, here's a decade to talk about. From there, it goes to 1990 to 2010, and then after from 2010 to 2023, which is when this book was published. Yeah, I thought that this was an interesting, comprehensive history of mostly the 20th century. Like I'm not learning a lot about ancient Korea in this, like not really a lot about like the Joseon dynasty, I think that's what it's called. And yeah, I enjoyed how the chapters were also structured around time periods, and then the authors would talk about kind of like North Korea and South Korea, but they would intersperse them. So I thought that was a more effective way than doing like half of the chapter about North Korea, half of the chapter about South Korea, or by doing like kind of differing chapters. I think by having them nicely intermingled, you were never like that far off of what you had just previously read about which one of the Koreas. Yeah, I think the conversation about unification was very interesting, and kind of a cool exploration of like, what will the realities of this look like? Who is wanting this goal, etc. So one of the big things about this book that I don't know how to articulate in a way that doesn't make me seem like a jerk or make me seem like I'm saying my opinions and I'm not saying my opinions. I just think that there's an interesting element where North Korea feels like this country that exists primarily within like the latter half of the 20th century to me. Like it feels like it is a relic of a past that we're still talking about today. And also I think that most Americans probably know more about North Korea than they truly know about South Korea. Like with South Korea, we know like bands and brands and foods, but we don't, I think many Americans would not know the history of South Korea, though we would know well elements of the history of North Korea. And I think it is very interesting to see how North Korea keeps that attention on it while being a closed off place. And then South Korea has really had to like fight to show, here's our culture, here's all the successes we have. Like they're really entering the world as like an up and coming, you know, superpower, like add a K to that bricks, you know what I mean? And in that, I know there's been like a very like concerted effort on behalf of like the Korean government to, you know, spread awareness of the Korean culture and Korean people, etc. So I mean, obviously they've been very successful. They exist in this like very interesting dichotomy of like the decaying brutalist versus the emerging shiny chrome. And though they are as old as each other, it feels as though Western consciousness about South Korea has only recently happened. And yeah, I mean, I hope that this book becomes more popular because I do think, I mean, I knew more about North Korean history than I did South Korean history. I had read more books about like nonfiction books about North Korea than I had South Korea. And as I'm beginning to read more South Korean literature, I'm realizing like I have a very big gap in like my knowledge about the history of this place. So I'm very glad that I read this. And then moving on to the last book that I read, which was Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. This is like a very easy read. I always joke that this is the book that I started reading because I wanted to read more, and then I stopped reading because I was busy reading other things. So in a way, it helped me read, but not read it. But I've read it now, and I really enjoyed it. I definitely took a lot of notes. I actually printed out some of the printables from his website and like glued them into my planner so I can keep track of making like updates and tracking my habits. I think that this book, what I like about it, its self-helpiness, is that it's not designed to tell you like manifest your dreams a la you are a badass, but it is showing how you can build a thing. Like if you want to do anything, it could be paint more, it could be read more, it could be become president of the United States. To do that, you need habits, and to do habits, you need to figure out how to make good habits and destroy bad ones. And I really like that. I think this was a good book for people to pick up. Yeah, and so it's like split up into 3 different laws. We have first law, make it obvious. Second law, make it attractive. Third law, make it easy. Fourth law, make it satisfying. And then there's advanced tactics, how to go from being merely good to being truly great. And I think that the effective thing this book does is it not only shows like here's that way to make a good habit, it also kind of inverts that and says like here's how to avoid a bad habit. One takeaway that I'll give you that was just kind of a sample of the kind of insights this book gives you is that people who avoid bad habits don't do so because they're constantly exposing themselves to it. They're avoiding those habits like whole cloth from the start, right? The thing that makes not doing something that you don't want to do easy is making it a frictionless experience. So if your thing is, oh, I don't want to eat chocolate, people who don't eat chocolate because they never have chocolate near them. They're not constantly testing their willpower. So if you're constantly finding yourself in a situation where you're testing your willpower to avoid breaking a habit or to avoid going into a bad habit, figure out how to like stop the decision-making part of that so that you don't even have to say, well, do I want this or do I not want this? Avoid it, you know? You walk past the ice cream shop on the way home, walk a different way, figure out a different path for yourself. I kind of want to do maybe more like videos testing out the habits. I think that would just be personally a really fun exercise. So I really quickly wanted to review my reading month with the goals that I had for the year and see how they match. So the theme is building me in 5 years. That's my reading theme for the year. 1 is good food eaten, which I'll get to that. 2 is good habit having, and 3 is well informed. So, and 4 is not relevant, but 5 is 2023, 2022 reading vibes. So good food eaten, that's my currently reading. It's Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. So I'm doing that. That's my currently reading. Goal 2 is good habit having. I mean, Atomic Habits, clearly I'm good habit having reading. 3 is well informed. And 5 is 2022, 2023 reading vibes, which this definitely fits into what I was reading in 2022, 2023. So I'm very excited that I do feel like this was a month that aligned with my goals. And so yeah, I've already told you what I'm currently reading. And lastly, I wanted to share the 2 books that I acquired in February. Book 1 is The Maroons, an abolitionist novel by Louis Timagène. What? I hope I pronounced that correctly. The author is a writer and physician of West African and French descent. Despite being barred from formal education because of his race, he went on to publish the first novel in Réunionese literature, Les Marrons, which he published in Paris. So I'm very excited about this. And then my parents were visiting Vietnam and Thailand, and they brought back this book, Last Night I Dreamed of Peace, An Extraordinary Diary of Courage from the Vietnam War by Dang Thuy Tram. This book is essentially the translated diary of a doctor who was killed by an American patrol in South Vietnam. So anyway, that has been my reading experience for the month of February. Let me know what you thought of these books, if you've read any of them, and I can't wait to see my next video. Bye!